Assalamualaikum and greetings to all. This is video lecture slides week 4A, and for this video lecture slides, all of you should be able to demonstrate the understanding on cultural diversity and development, as well as their impacts on communication systematically at the end of this video lecture slides. And this is our course learning outcome too. Now, before we have a look at what these video lecture slides are all about, basically these video lecture slides will look at the trends in development theory. Let's recap and try to remember what video lecture slides week 4A talk about. So basically in the video lecture slides week 4, we look at the dimensions of development theories. We have 7 dimensions: context, explanation, epistemology, methodology, imagination, representation, as well as future. Actually, representation comes first, and then imagination, and then future. So for this one here, it's the trends in development theory. Basically, we have 6 pairs of trend. One is, let's say, we put in column A, and the other we put in column B. So let's actually look at why we have 2 columns first. So we can explain this in 2 ways. The first one is actually we look at what happened before Cold War end and what happened after Cold War end. So that's where before Cold War end is in column A, and then after Cold War end in column B. So that's one way of looking at these pairs. Or alternatively, as mentioned in our module, if you look on page 19, so the way the pairs are explained is that using century. So during the 19th century, before the end of the 19th century, we have column A, and then moving towards late 20th century, we have column B. So that's the second way, or the alternative way, to explain what happened to the pairs in column A and B. Now let's have a look at what's in column A first. So basically, before the war, the Cold War ended, we have macrostructures as a way of developing something. We have structuralism, we have determinism, we have generalizing or homogenizing, we have singular, and we have Eurocentrism. So all the one in red, they are what we call before the Cold War ended, or during the 19th century, up until the 19th century. So this is basically column A. For column B, if we want to put it in the table and columns, so after the Cold War ended, and or you can say after the 19th century, that means late 20th century, the trend in terms of development have changed. So we have actor orientation, agency, we have constructivism, we have interpretative turn or contingency, we have differentiating, and we have plural for singular. Last but not least, we have polycentrism or multipolarity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I know this is going to be quite tough, so I want you to listen very carefully to the examples. Now, let's say we are talking about the trends in development theory. So we talk about singular. Singular is a trend before the Cold War ended, or you can say singular is a trend during the 19th century. So what does it mean by singular? So basically everything is under one scope of instruction. One scope of instruction. So there's only one rule that you have to follow. And after the Cold War ended, or in the late 20th century, everything now can have multiple methodologies or multiple ways of doing things. So that's why we have plural. So this is singular versus plural. So I'm going to explain now one by one for this particular red and blue, red and blue, red and blue. If you talk about development, we are talking about policies, for example. We are talking about how people do things, methodology. We are talking about the cultural practices of that particular area, and so on and so forth. So when you talk about macro structures, basically it's about macro is big, so everything is put under one place, under one structure. So that is before the Cold War ended, or during the 19th century. And then after the Cold War ended, late 20th century, we have the countries, for example, becoming more independent. So that's why we have actor orientation, or another word for that would be agency. Agency means being independent. So that's one. In terms of structuralism, during the Cold War or before the Cold War ended, everything is very structured. Everything must follow one pattern, must follow one direction. But after the Cold War ended, and in the late 20th century, everybody, or some countries or all countries, they can construct their own rules. They can be different from the others. It's not structured anymore. So that's the division before and after the Cold War ended, or during the 19th century and late 20th century. And then we talk about determinism. Determinism is something like everything is being done for you. Everything is being identified for you. You don't have to think about anything. You just follow. And after the Cold War ended, or in the late 20th century, you can have interpretative turn. That means you can actually interpret things. You can think on your own. Contingency, that means you have other plans. Before the Cold War ended, you cannot have other plans. Whatever that had been designed, or whatever that had been given to you, you have to accept, you have to take. But after the Cold War ended, or in the late 20th century, you can have your own plan. You can have your different ideas in order to do or to perform something, for example. And then the next one, generalizing or homogenizing. That means everything is put, as I said, under one structure, under one instruction, under one roof, for example. So that's it. This is before the Cold War ended, or in the in the 19th century. And after the Cold War ended, in the late 20th century, differentiating. That means people can be different now, because you can think on your own. You have different ideas from the other people, from the other country, then you can be different. So differentiating. Singular, I have explained just now. Singular, that means just one rule, everybody must follow. And now, after the Cold War ended, you can have multiple rules, multiple functions, and everything can be different. Last but not least, Eurocentrism. Before the Cold War ended, and in the 19th century, we have Eurocentrism. That means everything is centered based on the European cultures. So when you talk about European cultures, we'll talk about actually Russia, all these big nations. And after the Cold War ended, we have polycentrism. We have multipolarity. That means you can have different ways, different cultural practices, different rituals that you can use in order to develop something. So ladies and gentlemen, we have 6 pairs. The first 6 before the Cold War ended, or in 19th century, and then the second six after the Cold War ended, or in the late 20th century. So we'll talk more about this in our class, because this is rather tough and rather difficult for everybody to actually grasp if we do not have further understanding on what happened in terms of the historical background and context of this. So that is actually the Cold War, how it happens and how it ended. So we'll talk more about this in our next face-to-face class. Moving on, when you talk about the trends in development theory, here comes the term globalization. Now, where is Malaysia in terms of globalization? Where are we? Are we a global citizen now, or are we still Malaysian? Are we following or mimicking any countries? What are our role models in developing our country? Remember, we are still a developing nation. And last but not least, are we following any development theories that we have talked about in terms of the dimensions of development theories and in terms of the trends of the development theories? So let's have a look at this one. Now, these questions here that we have, the 4 questions, I want you to think carefully about this, and then in our next class, apart from expanding our notion and our ideas on these trends in development theory, we are also going to look at these 4 questions so that you will have better understanding of what is development in terms of the global context as well as in terms of Malaysia. Participatory, people-centered development, what does it mean? Now, if you look at our Malaysian context, especially the policies, so do you think that the government of Malaysia, are they doing things for the people? They are the people, okay? The government, the people in the parliament, they are the people. But are they doing things for the other people? Basically for the nation. So are they doing that? And we are going to discuss the policies that are involved in nation building in our next class as well. But before we go into that policies, you have to search for relevant policies so that we can have a smooth discussion on these policies. And then you have to decide any other possibilities or options that you will take in order to ensure a balanced development in Malaysia. So we are talking about the people for the people, the country for the people, led by the people. So we are talking about how do these people actually help other people. So what are the policies involved? So again, we have a lot to actually discuss in our face-to-face class. So be well prepared. Please find the policies relevant to develop a nation. Now, as a conclusion, when you talk about the development, the trends in development theories just now, so do you think that we follow any trend? And do you think that this trend that we have followed, are they important? Why? Remember, ladies and gentlemen, when you want to develop a country, we are talking all aspects of development, social, politics, economy, intellectual, everything. So when you're talking about developing a country, we must look at factors that can help boost all aspects of a nation. As I have mentioned just now, it's not just about economic development, or it's not just about political development. No, it's everything, all kinds, all types, all categories of development. And the most important thing to remember is the fact that do not just follow any trend because everyone else is following. So that is a very bad move by any nation. Just because America or just because Russia, they have nuclear weapons. So Malaysia suddenly decides, Okay, let's have nuclear. Why? If we don't need nuclear weapon, why must we have it? So it's not right to follow any kind of trend because everyone else is doing it. So something for you to ponder. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that wraps up the video lecture slides for week 4A. Remember, you have several tasks that you have to do before we come to our physical classes. You have to find you have to find policies which are relevant for developing a nation, and then you have to answer the 4 questions. Try to find answers for the 4 questions so that we can have smooth discussion, and we'll talk more about the history of the trends in development theories. With that, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum. Greetings to all, and should you have any questions, you are not sure of anything, just WhatsApp me personally or in our WhatsApp group, or you can email me. Thank you very much.